Hi friends, today I'm going to be talking about annotating. So I am not fully prepared for this video, but it is what it is. So just to start us off, I wanted to kind of talk about what annotating is. It's basically just either writing, highlighting, tabbing in books. Now a lot of people use this for nonfiction and studying type stuff. You can also use it for fiction, however, and that is primarily how I use it. I do annotate a little bit for my classes, in my textbooks, but for the most part, I annotate in fiction. I, however, don't annotate every single fiction book that I read. It's mostly books that I'm very excited about, so like brand new releases, very highly anticipated releases for me, or if I've started annotating a series, I usually continue to annotate that series. So basically, there's a couple reasons that you can annotate, and they are entirely up to you if you feel drawn to annotate in your book. So one of the biggest reasons that I annotate in my own books is to remember details and just favorite moments. So I basically use annotation in my fiction books as like a journal, essentially. I will highlight and tab and write even in the margins if I have thoughts, feelings, or reactions to something. Another good reason to annotate is if you are planning on writing or filming a review for a book. And using my annotations for reviews is something I want to get into more because I would like to do more in-depth reviews on this channel. But currently it's not something that I have a lot of energy to put toward. But it is something in the next year or two that I would like to get more into, and perhaps keeping a reading journal, like a review journal where I'm writing down thoughts as I go instead of afterward, because I tend to forget how I thought or felt about a book after about a month. And just like reviews, you can use those notes for book discussions. Another big reason that I annotate in my books is to engage with the story and be more immersed. Now, some people feel differently about this and feel that annotating kind of takes you out of the book, but for me, it personally doesn't do that. Like I said, I do use annotation kind of as a form of journaling. To me, it's very sentimental. If I were to pass any books on to anybody in the future, like when I'm gone, I would love for somebody I know who is also a big reader, like somebody younger than me, for example, someone in my family perhaps, or a close friend that also really loves to read, to have some of my annotated books. I feel like I would love to read more books that are annotated by other people. And the last reason a lot of people annotate is to track trends, clues, and plot points. I did this in some of them. Most notably, I did this in Nona the Ninth. I had a tab of Who is Nona? And I used that to kind of track clues and hints and little plot things, little details that I thought would benefit me understanding what was going on. So when we talk about annotation, aside from the reasons why we annotate, or you might consider annotating in your books, there's also the tools. Everybody loves to talk about the tools of annotation. So I'm going to go just a little bit into that and show you some of the stuff that I use. So firstly, we have tabs. These are probably the most non-permanent ways to annotate in your books, especially if you're keeping your tabs and your notes separate. So if you're keeping a book journal or anything like that as you're reading. So there's a variety of tabs you can buy. These are some of the ones that I use. I personally like to try to match the aesthetic of the cover to the aesthetic of the tabs that I'm using. And I do color code based on what I'm tabbing. This is not something I always did. Initially, when I first started, I wasn't matching them to the cover, but to me, it just makes it a little fun. Now, highlighters are another way that you can annotate. This is kind of a permanent way to do it. There are erasable highlighters, which I do have a set. I would not use these in my books though, because you can still kind of tell where it was highlighted even when you go over it with the erasing solution. There's a variety of brands you can use. Some of the most popular are the midliners. You can use Crayola markers, to be honest with you. You can use Tombow markers. A lot of people like to use the brush tips. And the other most basic tool of annotation is either pen or a pencil Some people use pencil so then they can go and erase later. I don't see the point. If you're going to use pencil and write in the actual book, just write in a journal instead. If you're going to erase it later, it doesn't, that's a whole lot of work. In my opinion, I personally, when I do write in a book, this is the type of annotation that I do the least often. I use a pen, and my favorite is the Pilot Dr. Grip pen. And then I also have I think they're the Sharpie S pens. I'm not quite sure what brand they are. You'll be able to see them here. These are the rainbow gel pens. I love this brand of pen. Prior to getting the Dr. Grip Pilot pen, these were my favorite types of pens in general. I like to use them at work and stuff. But I find that they, the very, very fine tip, while that's good for in a book, it can be really frustrating sometimes because the roller ball will get kind of jammed up and then it'll scrape the paper sometimes. Personally, if I'm writing, my go-to is that Dr. Grip pen. On top of being like a really smooth write, in my opinion, it's refillable and it's very comfortable, especially if you have any kind of tendonitis or carpal tunnel in your hand. This pen is amazing. It is worth the price. I have one of them. I plan to get like one or two once I'm settled down at a permanent job so that I can have them at my desk. But currently I only have the one. I just buy refills for it. Another thing you might consider getting is a pencil case. I have one. I got this on Amazon. It's just a little yellow like zip case. It holds quite a lot and it's small enough that I can throw it in a bag and take it with me if I want to. Another suggestion would be clear Post-it notes. These are good for anybody who hates writing in their books because you could take your notes on the clear Post-it instead of on the actual book, and then you'd be able to remove those along with tabs later. So that's a good solution if you're wanting to do all three without highlighting, essentially. If you're wanting to annotate, tab, and write notes, then these are the best solutions. The clear Post-it notes and the tabs are the most non-permanent ways to annotate. Now, the most common question is, okay, so I want to start annotating. What do most people take notes on? I covered some of that earlier, but there are some things to consider. So first you want to figure out if you want to use a key or you don't want to use a key at all. Personally, I like to use a key, and this is where I color match my tabs to match some type of element that I'm tracking throughout the book. And honestly, sometimes I make more than I need. I will show some examples of this where I intended to track something as I was reading and didn't really get as much of that as I thought I would. And there have been times where I've had to add categories. Some things you might track are quotes, elements of world building, like I said, favorite moments. I tend to like quotes, favorite moments, some world building, especially if it's a science fiction or a fantasy novel. But the most often thing that I like to track is quotes and kind of favorite moments, or plot details, where I think a plot point might be brought back up in the future. Sometimes I write my thoughts and my feelings in the margins. This is a rare occasion for me, but I do it. The next two things are things that people do when they annotate. I personally don't do these yet, but I thought they were really interesting and good points, so I wanted to include them. And that's, in terms of taking notes, you may use new colors with each reread. So if you just use a single highlighter, that's the most basic you could do, is use a single highlighter and a pen. And then the next reread, you would use a different color. And I really like the idea of doing this, although I am not a big rereader. I am trying to do more of that of my favorite series, and I think this would be really interesting because you'd catch different things each time you reread a series. And you may feel differently about things as you reread. And the other thing a lot of people do is drawing or kind of decoupage, junk journaling in the book. I have seen really beautiful examples of this, but I personally don't do it. I do collage journal, junk journal separately, but I don't do it in my books. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you a little bit of insight into how I personally annotate and how you might use annotation. for your own books. I know my video wasn't in the most in-depth or aesthetic compared to other people's, but I did want to talk about this because I mostly wanted to show off some of the books that I've annotated. And I have a goal next year to annotate more of my books. So maybe I'll do an updated version of this video next year. We'll see. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.